I'm a leaner Vance, age 30. The night my family evicted me, I discovered that in certain households, the loudest fabrication consistently gains immediate credence. My sister stood weeping profusely in the yard, as if her entire existence had been shattered, gesturing toward me and claiming I was responsible for the breakdown of her marriage. My mother refrained from asking a single question. My father sought no evidence. He simply gazed at me with revulsion and yelled, "Get out, you don't deserve to be part of this family." Following this, he began tossing my possessions onto the grass. My footwear struck the damp lawn, my literature scattered into the soil. A photograph frame shattered upon impact with the path. My sister continued to wail, asserting that I had connected her husband with the individual who demolished their household, that I had facilitated his infidelity, and that none of this would have transpired had I remained uninvolved in her affairs. I immediately recognized her falsehood. However, when your own mother refuses eye contact and your father nudges your luggage off the stoop with his foot, veracity begins to diminish in significance compared to disgrace. Consequently, I neither shrieked nor pleaded. I gathered what I could, proceeded to the street's edge, and departed. A week later, I sat by myself in a leased carriage house, a book resting in my lap, attempting to reacquaint my being with tranquility when an electronic message appeared. The sender prompted me to straighten up. The subject heading caused a sickening sensation. I opened it, perused it once, then a second time, and upon reaching the attached file, I grasped precisely why my sister had been so eager to point the finger at me initially. Within 20 minutes, my mobile device became inundated with notifications. From my sister. "Please refrain from sending that email." From my mom. "We made a mistake. Please grant us an opportunity." From my dad. "We must converse. Return home." I gazed at the display, recalled the broken picture frame in the garden, and responded with a brief 2-word message. "Absolutely not." However, prior to revealing the contents of that email, and why it transformed my family from self-righteous to terrified in less than 60 minutes, answer me this. If your own parents evicted you based on a falsehood, could you ever pardon them? In reality, the evening I was expelled marked not the beginning, but rather the precise instant my sister's fabrication finally gained public attention. I relocated to a minuscule carriage house situated on Asheville's eastern perimeter. After 2 days, it presented with thin partitions, cramped stairways, a misaligned kitchen drawer that perpetually remained ajar, and a single modest window situated above the sink, overlooking a brick facade. Though not aesthetically pleasing, it was unequivocally my own. Moreover, a peculiar sense of solace permeated being in a locale where no one could abruptly determine my unwelcome presence. My occupation involved serving as a collections manager at a maritime museum, a title more impressive in sound than in actuality. Predominantly, my role entailed conserving antique charts, documenting devices from sunken vessels, and manipulating artifacts that had endured tempests, conflicts, saline environments, and the passage of years. I once believed that rendered me composed in demanding situations. Snorts. Following the events with my family, I recognized it merely equipped me with an aptitude for managing compromised items. My elder sister, Vanessa Vance, inhabited an altogether distinct sphere. She presided over philanthropic gatherings, posed for regional periodicals, organized brunches for individuals who relished being photographed assisting others, and navigated Asheville as if each space existed solely to illuminate her. Her spouse, Ethan Davis, was an architect. Reserved, courteous, articulate, the type of individual people instantly confided in due to his apparent lack of need for recognition. To external observers, they appeared flawless. To those sufficiently familiar with Vanessa, their lives seemed meticulously orchestrated. 3 days following my departure, my closest companion, Nina Brooks, arrived with prepared food, a pair of disposable plates, and sufficient indignation on my behalf to warm the entire dwelling. Nina conceived museum displays, sported paint smears on her denim as if they were integral to her character, and was once prohibited from a donor luncheon for informing a board member that his concept amounted to nothing more than overpriced absurdity with inadequate illumination. She settled cross-legged on my flooring as I recounted every detail: the indictment, the yelling, the containers in the garden, and my mother's complete failure to inquire about its veracity. Upon my conclusion, Nina remarked, "That narrative is excessively flawless. Vanessa did not impulsively fabricate it in a moment of panic. She constructed it proactively, prior to any necessity. My inclination was to dispute it, primarily because my exhaustion rendered me prone to self-doubt. Perhaps I overlooked something," I suggested. "It's possible I truly did place Adam in an inappropriate situation at an unfortunate moment." Nina placed her fork on the table and met my gaze directly. "Claire," she stated, "this is precisely the strategy individuals such as Vanessa employ. They cause you to doubt your recollections, simultaneously guiding others towards a narrative that safeguards their interests." Then she uttered the statement that redirected the entire course of events. "Therefore, cease emotional contemplation and commence historical reasoning." What preceded this deception? The following day, as I reapplied labels to brass navigational instruments within the museum's storage facility, Nina messaged me. "Harper Sterling is willing to speak," she wrote. "Make the most of it." Harper had co-chaired philanthropic galas alongside Vanessa and possessed a keen social intellect that retained every detail. Who showed up behind schedule, who departed prematurely, who exhibited an overly quick smile, who consumed too much alcohol, and who expressed differing sentiments privately versus publicly. We convened with her that night at a vinotka situated close to Willow Creek Park. She had applied vivid red lipstick and wore the countenance of someone regretting her assent even before we were seated. Initially, she offered us refined platitudes. Vanessa was experiencing duress. The marital dissolution had been emotionally charged. Family dynamics were intricate. Subsequently, Nina leaned in and articulated, "That's a sophisticated observation, Harper, but it fails to address the fundamental inquiry. Why was Vanessa so quick to assign blame to Claire?" Harper grew silent. She stirred the ice in her drink once, then lowered her tone. "Because she was already apprehensive about something else," she revealed. My heart rate accelerated. "What other matter?" She paused, then eventually disclosed. There were unconfirmed reports concerning Vanessa and a gentleman from the Preservation Committee. Nothing widely known, merely murmurs sufficient to prompt her to observe Adam intently, almost as if she required him to appear culpable before scrutiny fell upon her too intensely. That represented the initial significant disclosure. Harper then provided a name, Owen Cooper. He managed the logistical aspects for the spring preservation retreat, she affirmed. If anyone possesses knowledge of individuals' locations, it would be him. Once Harper departed, I remained seated, contemplating my drink. Nina was already retrieving her satchel, as though the evening were merely commencing. Yet, upon returning home, the adrenaline dissipated, leaving me with a more unpleasant sensation: profound fatigue. A genuine weariness that rendered vanishing appear less challenging than engaging in conflict. I reviewed the unread communications from my mother, imploring me to adopt a sensible attitude. For a brief period, I genuinely contemplated abandoning the entire matter. Allow them to maintain their fabrication. Allow them to retain their relationships. Permit them to feign my culpability if it afforded me tranquility. Then my mobile rang. Nina had forwarded a photograph of the misaligned drawer in my kitchen, accompanied by a single caption. "Even this drawer acknowledges its damage. That doesn't justify pretending it functions correctly." I chuckled despite my mood. That seemingly insignificant message deterred me from giving up. The following morning, I proceeded to meet Grant. Owen Cooper joined us at an establishment serving oysters by the river. From the moment he took his seat, his aversion to disorder was unmistakable. He appeared to be the sort of man who would press his shirts to the accompaniment of classical compositions and rely on calendared alerts for matters most individuals instinctively recall. His tone was composed, His timepiece impeccably shined, and his opening statement was, "My presence here is not motivated by retribution. I am here because your sister overstepped a boundary." That revelation conveyed more insight than mere hearsay ever could. Individuals like Grant typically avoid dramatic situations unless their taciturnity begins to resemble complicity. He clarified that the unsubstantiated reports concerning Vanessa had surfaced several months prior to the divorce petition. She had been dedicating excessive time to Benjamin Hayes, a married preservation consultant who navigated Asheville's philanthropic circles as if simultaneously omnipresent and unanchored. Initially, these occurrences were readily rationalized: committee gatherings, patron arrangements, event timetables. Subsequently, late-evening strategy discussions, atypical lodging demands during board retreats, and two distinct instances where Vanessa began posing peculiar inquiries about Adam emerged. Specifically, which women he had conversed with at museum functions, if he had appeared preoccupied recently, or if anyone had mentioned him interacting with someone unfamiliar. "That was my point of concern," Grant stated. "She wasn't inquiring like an anxious spouse." Instead, her questions resembled those of someone constructing an alibi in anticipation of an impending indictment. A chill spread through my chest. "Are you certain?" He cast me a gaze so unwavering it nearly made me self-conscious for posing the query. "Claire, my profession involves supervising personnel. I can distinguish between impulsive fear and deliberate foresight." Then he propelled a folded printed document across the table. It comprised a logistical manifest from a preservation weekend in Charleston. The majority of its content was standard: arrival times, accommodation notes, supplier information. However, inscribed by hand in the margin were two subtle modifications: Vanessa Hay, Benjamin Hayes, identical floor, shared section, unobtrusive relocation. Spouses not informed. Nina expelled a soft breath. I fixated on the document, sensing my abdomen clench. It provided some indication, yet it was insufficient, not for individuals akin to my parents, not for a woman of Vanessa's disposition. "She can readily rationalize this," I stated. "A professional coincidence. Unfavorable optics." Grant concurred. "Likely, which is why you require something internal to the marriage." He provided Adam's name without prompting. He had suspected an issue long before her filing. However, Vanessa became vociferous first, and once she did, all others ceased their inquiries. I reached out to Adam that night. I anticipated either no response, perhaps irritation, or a courteous decline. Instead, he responded in under 10 minutes. "Tomorrow works for a meeting." We convened the subsequent morning on a shaded seating area in one of Asheville's historic plazas. Adam had the appearance of someone who had suffered prolonged insomnia, only recently acknowledging it. He wasted no time. "Vanessa informed both our families that you connected me with a certain woman via the museum," he recounted. "She claimed emotional limits were transgressed." I met his gaze directly. "Were they?" His entire expression stiffened. "No, I conversed with that benefactor on 2 occasions, both publicly, and each exchange lasted perhaps 5 minutes. Vanessa required a narrative that portrayed her as victimized rather than culpable." I passed him Grant's printed document. He perused it deliberately, his jaw clenching. "I knew it," he murmured. He then divulged information that altered the whole account. Several months prior, one of Vanessa's hotel booking confirmations had inadvertently synchronized to an outdated shared tablet. She erased it before he could preserve it. Yet, he recalled the hotel's designation because it was not an establishment they frequented as a couple and for which they had no customary use. The instant he articulated it, my entire physique became motionless. The Ashcroft House Hotel, an upscale lodging located outside Asheville. I recognized it because the museum had previously hosted a patron dinner there the year before, and I had managed the guest contact rosters. This implied that if Vanessa had rutilised a prior booking profile linked to that specific event and neglected to delete my museum email from the backend alert system, any amendment, invoice overview, or automated room notification could have been erroneously transmitted to me. It was an improbable prospect, and before we could pursue it, serendipity presented a diversion. Harper messaged Nina that very afternoon, excited by fresh rumors. Evidently, a woman at church alleged that Daniel was not the sole man Vanessa had grown excessively intimate with. For 2 hours, Nina and I vigorously pursued that clue. It led nowhere, a dead end, unfounded hearsay, possibly intentional misdirection. I sat at my kitchen table that evening, nursing a headache amidst a stack of documents, and mused. What if this entire situation is nothing more than hearsay and chance occurrences? Nina rested against my countertop, arms crossed. Then we ascertain the truth and cease, she asserted. However, we will not desist simply because Vanessa surpasses you in theatricality. She spoke truthfully. Thus, rather than challenging my sister with incomplete evidence and allowing her to evade consequences through tears, I powered on my laptop and began searching for something she couldn't outmaneuver with theatrics, something impervious to her persuasive weeping, something documented. The subsequent day felt agonizing. I spent the morning at the museum feigning normal human operation, while my thoughts perpetually revolved around the identical prospect. During Snort's my midday meal, I retrieved archived records from the museum's benefactor dinner held at Ashcroft House and scrutinized every historical logistical sheet, guest roster, and alert profile I could locate. And there it lay, an internal event profile from the preceding year, with my museum designated as a secondary contact for booking modifications and invoice adjustments. Not confidential guest information, but the administrative surplus that remains unconsidered until an error occurs. Had Vanessa repurposed a segment of that event profile when reserving a private accommodation and neglected to delete my address, the hotel system could unequivocally have transmitted something to me in error. That was my sole requirement, a course of action. I composed a meticulous message to guest services. I leveled no accusations. I made no mention of an illicit relationship, my relatives, or Vanessa's marital dissolution. I merely elucidated my belief that my museum email might still be incorrectly linked to a repurposed booking profile from a former nonprofit function, and inquired if any recent administrative communications had been misdirected. Then I dispatched it, attempting to refrain from checking my electronic mail every 3 minutes like a deranged individual. By the subsequent afternoon, I began to suspect the lead had gone cold. By 3 o'clock, I despised myself for harboring hope. By 4, I was in the museum's preparation chamber, holding a refurbished brass compass, contemplating that perhaps evidence wouldn't be significant regardless. Perhaps my family had already selected their favored narrative because it offered an easier path than acknowledging disgrace. Then my mobile device vibrated. A single new electronic message. Sender, Ashcroft House Guest Services. Subject line, rectification of secondary notification contact, appended invoice overview. I placed the compass aside and accessed the email. The initial sentence was courteous. The subsequent one altered everything. The hotel expressed regret for the disruption and affirmed that my email address had erroneously persisted as a secondary notification contact on a repurposed executive booking profile. Included for my documentation were the amended reservation notifications and financial summaries that had been produced prior to the detection of the mistake. My hands remained steady, initially. I accessed the PDF document and reviewed each page. It detailed Vanessa Vance, Benjamin Hayes, 2 contiguous suites, spanning 2 distinct weekends, a request for privacy noted, late-night wine delivery, valet records, room service past midnight, and a specific mention of discrete entry provisions. I returned to the main text of the email and reread it, needing absolute certainty that I comprehended its contents. And there it was, unambiguous and ruinous. This was not hearsay, conjecture, or an enigmatic, undisclosed alert. It constituted an unblemished administrative rectification from the hotel itself, clarifying that my former museum email had remained linked to a repurposed reservation profile and that the appended records had been created before the error was rectified. That constituted the electronic message. That was the item that instilled dread in my family. A mundane, official, undeniable verification that my sister had been precisely where she ought not to have been, with the exact man she ought not to have been with, concurrently with the period she was blaming me for destroying her marriage. I messaged Nina 3 words. I possess it. She immediately phoned, instructing. Recite it for me. I complied. By my completion, she was already in her vehicle. We occupied the museum's parking area with the attached document displayed between us, and she declared. This illustrates why individuals such as Vanessa dread official documentation. Disagreements can arise from drama, but not from factual records. A decision remained for me, to transmit it at once or to confront Vanessa beforehand. I opted for confrontation. In part, I desired to witness her expression as her act crumbled. In part, because cornered deceivers occasionally disclose more than they mean to. She unlatched the door to her townhouse, dressed in a cream-colored sweater and meticulously applied makeup, as though the woman who had wept in our parents' garden had been portrayed by a stand-in. What is your desire? She retorted sharply. I entered before she could impede me. To understand why you attributed fault for your divorce to me before anyone even inquired what you were concealing. She emitted a harsh, brief laugh. You are incredible. I raised my mobile device. Ashcroft House indicates otherwise. The response was minute, yet discernible. A momentary flash, a hesitation, an instant where the performer within her failed to receive her prompt. Of what are you speaking? She inquired. I presented her with the initial page of the billing statement. Her digits clenched. Her gaze fell. When she lifted her eyes again, apprehension had at last supplanted her pretense. How did you obtain this? She murmured. From the electronic message your negligence sent to the incorrect recipient, I responded. I described how she attempted denial, then indignation, then offense. So now you're monitoring me. No, I countered. You repurposed an outdated profile and inadvertently exposed yourself. She averted her gaze, then uttered the single statement that rendered the entire space chilling. Adam was already departing. Then why accuse me? I pressed. She pivoted back, hissing. Because you were expedient. Those 4 words. That was the extent of it. No regret, no expression of remorse, no alarm, merely a sense of privilege. My existence had been simpler to forsake than her public image. That declaration extinguished the final vestiges of compassion I possessed. I exited without uttering a further syllable. Partway along the street, my mobile device began illuminating with incoming calls from my mother, then my father, then Vanessa. I declined to answer. They were already aware. The sole remaining question was how I would proceed with this knowledge. That night, Nina and I arranged all the materials across my kitchen table, as if constructing a legal display rather than processing a familial treachery. Grant's accommodation notes, Adam's chronology, the digital capture of Vanessa's menace, the hotel's electronic message itself, the appended invoice summaries. The phrasing was significant, the sequence was important, and above all, the origin held paramount weight. Had I merely transmitted the hotel invoices, Vanessa would have asserted I either pilfered or falsified them. However, the guest services email altered that perception. It meticulously clarified how the records reached me, rendering the entire situation more challenging to distort. We meticulously composed the electronic message. It contained no histrionics, no disparagements, no theatrics, only a chronological account and substantiating evidence. I directed it to my mother, my father, Adam, and Vanessa. The subject header indicated rectification of baseless accusation and appended documentation. Within the body, I affirmed that I had been wrongly implicated in the dissolution of Vanessa's marriage by introducing Adam to another female. I further stated that earlier that day, I had obtained an administrative amendment from the Hawthorne Manor, verifying that my museum email had erroneously persisted as a link to a repurposed reservation profile. I conveyed that the appended records substantiated Vanessa Vance and Benjamin Hayes reserving contiguous suites during the identical timeframe in which Vanessa diverted suspicion onto me. Subsequently, I appended the hotel's electronic message, succeeded by the reservation overviews. At its conclusion, I inscribed a definitive statement: I will no longer bear culpability fabricated to shield another's infidelity. I dispatched it at 12 minutes past 8 that morning. 7 minutes thereafter, Vanessa phoned. Then again, then my mother, then my father. I responded to none of their attempts. At 29 minutes past 8, the text messages began. From Vanessa: kindly refrain from forwarding that email elsewhere. From my mother: we erred, please grant us a single opportunity. From my father: we must converse, return home. Then another from him: this must remain confidential. Confidential. That term nearly elicited laughter from me. There was absolutely nothing discreet about my possessions being cast into the garden like refuse. I focused on the display, recalling the tone of my father's voice declaring my unworthiness of the family, and transmitted a 2-word reply. Definitely not. Adam telephoned from a number I had not yet muted. Upon my answering, he remained silent for an instant before articulating: thank you, not out of joy, nor because veracity simplified marital dissolution, but because someone had at last documented what Vanessa had endeavored for weeks to conceal through pretense. He informed me his legal counsel would utilize the electronic message and its appended files. He furthermore stated that Daniel's wife had already raised inquiries regarding certain unaccounted for hotel bills in the past and had been deceived. Now, she had legitimate grounds to reject ambiguous responses. About midday, my mother arrived at the museum. A volunteer approached me, stating an agitated woman was in the waiting area. The instant I spotted her beneath the painting of turbulent ships, nervously coiling her purse strap, I understood her presence. Claire, I beg you, she implored the moment our eyes met. Don't inflict this upon us. The term us felt like a direct affront. You've already wronged me, I countered. You expelled me from my home without a solitary inquiry. She immediately burst into tears. Vanessa informed us, she began. I am aware of what Vanessa conveyed to you, I interrupted. My concern is why my own mother showed no interest in verifying its veracity. She resorted to her customary rhetoric: talk of feelings, bewilderment, kinship, and alarm. Ultimately, the genuine statement escaped her lips. Should this become widely known, Vanessa stands to forfeit everything. That was it. Not sorrow for my plight, but apprehension for hers. She ought to have considered that before exploiting my life as a buffer, I stated. She extended her hand toward my arm, I retreated. Return home, she murmured. We can resolve this. I regarded her for a prolonged period before declaring, a residence ceases to be a home when it casts out the innocent daughter to shield the culpable one. Later that night, my father sent a message, requesting my presence at the house for a single discussion. I attended because a part of me longed to discern the sound of truth in that space, now that their deception was no longer effective. Vanessa was already present, visibly pale and enraged. My mother had placed tissues thoughtfully on the coffee table. My father remained standing behind his chair, as if his stance could somehow imbue him with decorum. He commenced with, "You have conveyed your message." No, I responded, the evidence presented my case. I merely transmitted it. Vanessa began to speak of stress, isolation, mental burden, the intricacies of marital bonds, and the inevitability of errors. She then lowered her tone and declared, I never intended for Claire to suffer such profound pain. My gaze fixed on her. You invoked my name before any inquiries were made. You fully intended for me to endure sufficient harm to ensure your own salvation. Throughout the entire evening, this was the first instance no one interjected. My father eventually inquired, "What is your desire?" It was the initial genuine question posed to me since the incident in the yard. I demand the truth, I articulated clearly. I replied, I was not responsible for your divorce. I did not betray this family. I was expelled because Vanessa fabricated a story. The quiet stretched on. My father then stated, without making eye contact, "You were not the cause of the divorce." My mother appended, "We acted with undue haste. Too swiftly, not maliciously, not disgracefully, merely too quickly." I then directed my gaze at Vanessa and pressed, "Do you concede this?" She shut her eyes and softly breathed. Yes, this moment should have felt triumphant. Instead, it registered as belated, insubstantial, and craven. My father then undermined even that by asserting, "Now, we must address this matter as a cohesive family unit." It was then that I fully grasped their objective: not equity, not recovery, but suppression. Consequently, I rose and declared, "You are not soliciting pardon. You are demanding authority." No one refuted my claim. I departed for the second occasion. This time, no one feigned ignorance regarding my reasons. As soon as the truth was formally documented, it ceased to be a private family affair. Adam's legal counsel requested duplicates of the hotel email and its supplementary files, which I provided. Benjamin Hayes unexpectedly stepped down from 2 preservation committees within that very week. A prominent donor, family subtly withdrew from an upcoming event Vanessa was slated to co-direct. A co-chair of a charitable organization cited a scheduling conflict to create separation. None of these developments occurred because I circulated through the community divulging my personal matters. They transpired because when concrete evidence surfaces, individuals begin to formulate their own inquiries. My sister had, in fact, constructed her entire existence based on the premise that such questions would never arise. 3 days subsequent, Vanessa appeared at my carriage house by herself, without cosmetics, a practiced smile, or accompanying individuals. She remained behind the screen door, clutching her arms as though she felt a chill. "May I enter?" she inquired. I maintained the screen as a barrier. "State your purpose," I instructed. She seemed diminished in stature, yet not gentler. That distinction held significant weight. "Daniel is disclaiming anything beyond a platonic relationship," she reported. "Adam is leveraging the documentation. Mom is experiencing insomnia. Dad refuses to even glance at me. You achieved your objective." Her statement confirmed to me that she still possessed no true comprehension. "No," I clarified, "my desire was not to be expelled from my residence due to your falsehood." Her jawline tensed. "I was desperate," she offered. "You were premeditated," I retorted. She recoiled slightly at my words. For a fleeting moment, I perceived a flicker of sincerity. "I never anticipated it would progress to this extent," she claimed. "It advanced precisely as far as you permitted, provided the repercussions fell upon me rather than you." She then inquired if I would engage with Adam and urge him to be conciliatory. I genuinely laughed. "You attributed your divorce to me. You arranged for my expulsion. And now you expect me to assist in mitigating the repercussions." "I am your sibling," she shot back. "You were," I responded softly, "up until the point you determined my existence was an acceptable casualty." She glared at me as if I had betrayed her, a reaction that would have been amusing had it not been so lamentable. "So, this is the end," she demanded. "You are severing ties with me permanently." I reflected on the countless excuses over the years, her tendency to deem me expedient, and the utter lack of any genuine contrition. "No," I stated, "you disown me first. I am merely declining to grovel my way back." She departed in a rage. Strangely, this departure instilled a sense of lightness in me. Her fury signified that she had absorbed my words, even if she would perpetually refuse to acknowledge it. That evening, my mother telephoned, imploring me to show mercy. 2 days subsequent, my father messaged, suggesting family therapy now that all facts were uncovered. I disregarded both overtures, not out of a desire for retribution at that point, but because I had at last understood the distinction between genuine recovery and being coerced back into an act. Concurrently, my museum director summoned me to her office. I entered, preparing myself for the potential intrusion of Daniel Cross's name into my professional sphere. Instead, she stated, "I've been informed there might be personal repercussions affecting certain nonprofit communities. Should anyone attempt to embroil the museum or your position in hearsay, we will decisively put an end to it. I was on the verge of tears due to the profound novelty of receiving protection without needing to implore for it. Weeks elapsed. The carriage house gradually felt less like a banishment and more like a fresh start. Na assisted me in painting a wall a shade of sea blue, remarking, "You require at least one surface here that evokes a sense of the future." She consistently brought me small, functional presents, a toolkit, good quality dishcloths, labels for my kitchen jars, and a lamp capable of illuminating the entire space. Each of those items carried greater significance than the elaborate emotional appeals my family began dispatching once they grasped I wouldn't simply return. My mother eventually left a voice message stating, "I acknowledge our failure toward you." This represented her nearest approach to a genuine expression of regret. My father never reached such a point. His regret remained purely formal, as though a single revised declaration could offset public disgrace. It could not. And amidst the tranquility following all these events, I comprehended an aspect of narratives of vengeance rarely articulated. Retaliation does not invariably entail the ruin of another. Occasionally, it involves declining to continue bearing the burden they imposed. At times, it means allowing veracity to undertake the arduous task while you emerge from beneath the deception. Approximately a month subsequent to the email, Adam requested a final meeting at a riverside coffee shop. By that juncture, the divorce had transitioned from an initial state of shock to one of practical arrangements, and he appeared less devastated than previously, though still bearing the profound, lasting weariness that treachery imprints upon a countenance. He pushed a document across the table and remarked, "You might find this useful." It was a signed declaration from him, affirming in clear terms that I had never meddled in his marriage, never promoted any unsuitable liaison, and had been unjustly accused once Vanessa's connection with Benjamin Hayes started to emerge. I gazed at it for an extended period. Following weeks of advocating for my truth, there it lay in written form, from the sole individual whose testimony rendered the falsehood beyond resurrection. "You were not obligated to do this," I commented. He offered a weary, partial smile. "Perhaps not, but I'm weary of observing Vanessa distort every detail." He then uttered the phrase that lingered with me far beyond the document itself. "You were the sole candid individual in a household steeped in pretense." That phrase encapsulated the true essence of the entire narrative: pretense. Vanessa acted out the role of a victim. My mother feigned harmony. My father enacted authority, and for years I enacted absolution, optimistically believing it would ultimately secure me equitable treatment. It did not. The moment I ceased my act, everything underwent a transformation. My parents subsequently delivered the remaining few possessions still at their residence. My mother wept in the driveway. My father transported the heaviest carton, as if silent exertion could somehow symbolize regret. When he uttered, "There will always be a spot for you here with us," I countered. There wasn't one when it truly counted. He offered no rejoinder. Perhaps that represented the first genuine quietude he had ever granted me. Vanessa relocated from the townhouse a short time thereafter. Benjamin Hayes vanished from the philanthropic community. My sister did not suffer a complete loss of everything. Individuals like Vanessa seldom do. However, she forfeited something she had perpetually depended on: the ability to control the story before the unvarnished facts emerged. Regarding myself, I remained in Asheville. I retained my employment. I resumed sleeping uninterruptedly through the night. I identified which stair in the carriage house emitted a creak and ceased to interpret it as solitude. Na continuously maintained that I seemed taller recently. Perhaps I was. Disgrace has a more pronounced effect on posture than sorrow. On the anniversary of the evening I was expelled, my mother dispatched a single text message: "I continue to pray for your return to us." I contemplated it for a duration before responding. I found my way back to myself. That must suffice. And it was, for the true conclusion to this narrative isn't merely that a single email altered everything. It's the manner in which it transformed everything. The email originated from the Hawthorne Manor, sent by their guest relations department to rectify a contact oversight Vanessa had never detected. It clarified that my former museum email address had erroneously persisted on a recycled reservation profile and contained billing summaries indicating Vanessa and Daniel had reserved an adjoining suite during the identical week. She was implicating me in the downfall of her marriage. That singular email unveiled the illicit affair, revealed the deceit, disclosed the alacrity with which my family prioritized expedience over honesty, and laid bare their terror the instant official documentation supplanted theatricality. This was the impetus behind the rapid succession of messages. Not a sudden surge of affection, but an abrupt comprehension that I possessed undeniable evidence. Individuals often speak of vengeance as though it must manifest spectacularly to be significant. Mine did not. Mine appeared as a concise subject line, a hotel attachment, and the termination of my compliance. Mine took the form of declining to return home simply because those who had devastated me had at last become apprehensive. Mine resembled two simple words: no, never. My mother expelled me because my sister held me responsible for her divorce. Subsequently, a single email transformed every aspect. Not because it generated the truth, but because it compelled all who had evaded it to finally confront it in written form. And this is the query that continues to resonate with me. When individuals offer apologies solely after irrefutable evidence corners them, is that an expression of affection or merely fear disguised by a more amiable facade? From my individual perspective, this narrative serves as a potent life lesson concerning veracity, personal dignity, and the significance of discerning thought. Occasionally, individuals are quick to pass judgment without pursuing genuine information or insight, and such behavior can profoundly harm relationships. Consequently, education, emotional intelligence, and the capacity to scrutinize what we encounter are invaluable aptitudes in life. Beneficial understanding enables us to maintain composure, reason lucidly, and safeguard our principles when circumstances turn unjust. Ultimately, truth frequently resonates more powerfully than allegations. Therefore, I pose this question to you. If you found yourself in such a predicament, would you contend to establish the truth, or would you opt to withdraw and embark?